I'd like to introduce to you Spirit and Flesh. It's the name of our rock group. Our rock group was designed not only just as music, it was designed from people that live together, an inner experience of brotherhood. Our music portrays what we are, what we live continually 24 hours a day. The people in the band are people totally dedicated to giving their life to each other and showing people as an example what we can have together in a world if we're willing to give ourselves all the time.
Today I thought I would do something about a very famous, during my time, member of our community. You see, I was from a small town named Bernardston, and we went to a school, Pioneer, with 4 different towns: Bernardston, Northfield, Northfield, Leiden, and Warwick. Few members of Guild, but mostly just the 4 towns. That is how I met a man named Michael Metelica. Now, I did not know him well. I only remember him as the guy that had long blonde hair, lived in a tree house, and he sat in my English class. Now, he sat behind my best friend, and we spoke once or twice, but that's it. But this is his story. He was the founder and the main way, and he was behind the madness that was called the Free Spirits, the birth of life and loss in a new age. His friends and acquaintances described him as a dual-sided personality. One hand, an outlaw rock and roll biker, and on the other hand, he was a spiritual master. He was born in 1950 in Leiden, Massachusetts. At the time, the Pioneer Valley in western Mass was known for rural farmland, and at the age of 16, he moved to California to explore his interest in Hell's Angels. Quickly deciding that the group was not for him, he came back to Massachusetts, where he decided to pursue a Christian lifestyle, living off the land and helping others without asking anything in return. He built a treehouse, which I remember, on a large farm, which later was torn down by the locals of the area, replaced the house for himself and his followers. Eventually, through his charismatic leadership, he became one of the largest communes that came out of the 1970s. He begins with a beguiling leader story, just like most others. He has a tough upbringing, a spiritual journey to a place far away with a big idea. Personal accounts of Michael are not readily available. The collection of his life comes from a collection of sources. Daniel Brown's short essay, There Exists a Fine Line, Michael Metelica and the Renaissance Community, which I remember very well, Bruce Kessler's documentary, Few Spirits, and other various resources. When he returned from California, hippie ideas circulating in his mind, he began to embody some of the things he found were valuable. Non-violence, love, non-materialism. He became a local attraction, and Lynn people with similar mindsets began to flock to his treehouse, then see the man for himself. In 1968, a farmer named Elwood Babbitt approached Michael and told him and his friends, the common visitors to the treehouse, that he should purchase a plot of land and start a spiritual commune. Indeed, grounded it in spiritual ideals, the brotherhood of the spirit. Perhaps what should have been a red flag at the beginning was him and Michael's deal. They believed the earth was about to undergo cataclysmic change in anticipation of the Aquarian age. He had a vision where he was 6, where he stood above the earth and saw land rising and land falling. Elwood was getting the same information through the spiritual guides who warned that the destruction would be the result of man's negativity upon the planet and the need for nature to reset itself, after which the chastised survivors would be more open to the spiritual wisdom of the incoming age of Aquarius. Indeed, it was here that the commune truly began. It spread across the country, the communities, and had a group of nearly 300 members. This is not the story of the commune, but the story of Michael, as he was known in the Brotherhood, Rapunzel. Now, that's something I remember. I remember reading in the paper how he had changed his name legally to Rapunzel. He would notice how popular his group was becoming, and he decided to manipulate it to his advantage. Fueled by the Brotherhood's popularity, he began a band called Spirit in the Flesh. He sold the idea to the rest of the commune as a way to communicate the Brotherhood's spiritual ideas to wider audiences, appealing to the fad of rock and roll. He signed a contract with Metro Media Records and was expecting the release of the album shortly. When the company decided not to promote the album, skeptical on Michael's message, the Brotherhood employed their own tactics to get Spirit in the Flesh heard. They infiltrated news stations and plugged in the land live on the air. He was caught up in their frenzy with all the excitement of the upcoming release. His friends speculate. He began to get involved in risky habits, forming a cocaine habit, taking up drinking, and sexual promiscuity. It seemed that around 1970 was when his idea began to lose sight. They still followed him loyally. They marched the streets, chanting his name, and spread the news about his band. When the album was released in 1971, it sold less than 1,000 copies. Unable to give up on his dream, he urged members of the community to get jobs and fund the community's most recent purchases. He had Rolls Royces. I remember on 3rd Street in Turner's Falls, where some of the poorest in town lived, him pulling up with 27 Rolls Royces now. That was quite a sight to see, because he had fancy wallpaper, carpeting for the house, and he's still rooted on materialism. He was trying to appeal to more audiences, kicking off their eccentric hippie persona. Now, this is a town that, he was taking over. I remember that he had a store that was much like Cumberland Farms. He had the Renaissance Church, which still stands. It's still there, and up until a couple of years ago, at least, it still said Renaissance Church on it. He had an ice cream place that he opened. That I remember well. They opened it up on a Saturday. The heat was very, very hot that day. It was in the 90s, and they hadn't had any electricity for 4 days. And a lot of people got sick, and they were closed down by the Board of Health the same day. As Metelica's leadership was beginning to crumble, they became more nervous, and the University of Massachusetts Special Collections correspondence between members of the commune and Michael are very revealing. They ask him for higher pay, easier hours, and less unnecessary purchases. However, in 1976, the commune bought more land in hopes of building what they called the 2001 Center, a self-sustaining Echo Village. Suddenly it seemed that a group that regained some of its original values, but this didn't last very long. His decision in 1983 to build a rifle range on the land was the final alarm going off in my head. I heard about this plan on a lovely morning while working on one of my new solar houses. It was the last thing I wanted to hear because I knew I couldn't run away from this one. My personal level of tolerance could bear the cocaine, the fancy cars, the loud crew behavior, and muddy finances. Still hold on to my vision with the community. The guns for me was an insurmountable barrier, that the one thing that whatever integrity the Renaissance had left, it could not survive. That was by one of the leaders. It began to lose members big time in 1984 until 1988, when the last 12 members of the Renaissance community paid him a sum of $10,000 to leave and never return. He moved back to New York in 2003 and unfortunately was diagnosed with terminal cancer. There he died. It seems that he was, at least in his later years, not looked up by his followers anymore. A fatal flaw in any hero, he let the power and fame go to his head. Yet when we reflect on his now deceased leader, the former members use adjectives such as heroic, charismatic, and other synonymous descriptions. All in all, he was only human with a dream of the 1970s America, and that was the movement of the time. There's just a fine line in the Renaissance community by Daniel Brown, and it was at the final gathering of Beth Haggard's home that they took a picture of him just before. Now, in my high school yearbook, they have a picture of Michael standing outside of his tree house. He was a great character. I'm not here to judge him. He was never rude to me. He was always friendly. And I just wanted people to remember him. Thank you.